Hey everyone, welcome to today's class. Today we're going to be painting a colorful birch scene. We're going to start our way in the background and we'll work our way to the foreground. For today's class, you'll need an array of acrylic paints, red, blue, yellow, black, and white. A little bit of extra white paint will be a good thing for our birch trees on the top. But we'll go ahead and jump and get started. For you to get started with today's project, you're going to have a canvas of sort or acrylic paper you can choose. You'll also need a cup of water to rinse your brushes, a small plate to mix your colors, a paper towel for any messes, and an array of brushes, small to large sizes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start by mixing in. We're going to start at the top, and I have a paper plate here. I'm going to mix an orange, and I'm going to mix a yellow for some of our background colors. And we're going to start at the top and work our way to the background. So I'm going to put some yellow on my plate. And you can use any plate, you can use a palette, absolutely up to you. So I have a little bit of yellow right there. And I have a cup of water to rinse my brushes. So I'm going to put a little bit of red on my plate as well. I'm going to start with an orange, and then I'm just going to do a little bit of an orange. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of yellow, bring it to the side, and a little bit of red. I'm going to mix an orange. And you can decide how bold of an orange you want to be, or if you want it to be more subtle. And I'm just going to make enough of it just to cover about an inch or two at the top of the canvas. I'm going to do some long, smooth, horizontal brush strokes at the top. Now sometimes with acrylic paint, you can dip your brush in a little bit of water to move and stream this out. So I encourage you to use a little water to stretch your paint. Now what we're painting here is we are painting the background beautiful kind of sunrise, sunset colors. And I'm going to slowly work my way down from oranges to yellows. And I'm going to end up, there's going to be blue in the middle. I'm going to stop about halfway with a light blue. So I'm going to do some nice smooth brush strokes. I'm making this kind of bright because I thought it'd be really fun. If you wanted to add any white to soften this, you absolutely can. I'm just going to be a little vivid here for the moment. I can always dim this down a little bit with some white paint if I want to. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to make this nice and smooth. You can see how it's a little more orangey at the top. But I do want to bleed this yellow down just a little bit. So I'm just going to, with a little water on my brush, I'm going to soften the bottom of this yellow. I'm going to let it dry. Now you have an option for the background of this painting to add some mountains. Absolutely up to you. And if you want to add some blue in here, you can, but we're going to wait for our yellow to dry entirely before we do that. But I love this bright yellow. It's so beautiful. So take a few minutes to paint your yellow. At any point, you can pause this video to have a little bit more time here or there. So feel free to do that if you need to. Today I'm painting on acrylic paper, which is a great medium, a great piece of format to leverage. I love putting acrylic paper in in the frames. So I love to use 11 by 14 size, and then I can easily put it into a frame. It's quite nice. So in these classes, I might bounce around a little bit. I encourage you to, again, take your own time. But while the yellow's drying, for me, I am going to put a little bit of a blue lake down here on the bottom. So I'm going to be constructive with our time here. As this is drying, I'm going to put a blue lake down here on the bottom area. So I'm going to put a little bit of blue paint. A little blue will go a long way. So I'm just going to do a little bit of blue paint down here. All right. And I'm going to use a little bit of white paint. Put a little bit of white paint on my canvas as well, on my palette as well, on my plate. So again, the goal is to do all the details in the background first and then work our way to the foreground. So I'm just cleaning off my brush really well. And I'm going to rinse that off. And I'm going to just take a little bit of the blue and mix it with the white to have like a nice light blue color for my water. And then down here, I'm going to have beautiful blue, light blue water. Right at the bottom can be nice and light blue. And I'm going to come up about 2 or 3 inches. I'm just doing nice, smooth, horizontal brush strokes. I will add a little bit of darker blue contrast to the top of the lake here. But this is just really beautiful blue. This is just details that are going to be in the distance. So you can spend as much or as little time down here as you want. So again, I'm just doing a light blue first. And then we'll add a little bit of a gradient. Nice, smooth, long brush strokes. And again, take your time. All right, take your time. Nice, long, smooth brush strokes. And then if you want to, you can make a little bit of a darker blue, and you can find the top of your water line. So for me, I'm just going to do a long horizon line of like where the water will end, and I'll actually put mountains above this. And if I want to make it a little, and I'm holding the flat side of my brush, so I have like a 1/2 inch flat tip brush here. And this is just a little bit of shade in the distance on where the land will meet the water. And I'll make this nice and straight. And then you could put your brush on a little bit of water on your brush, and you can blend this darker color in, which is really fun. So you can always get like a nice clean edge after, but you can play with blending this as you go. Just going nice and slow. This is a really light colored water. If I wanted to make it a little darker, you can. It's absolutely up to you. If you have a sparing amount of white paint, just be careful on how much white you use so you don't run out, because you're going to put white birch trees on the top of all of this. So again, use water versus white paint if you have limited white paint available. So I want this water to be nice and smooth. You can see I have a nice blended transparency. A little water on your brush will help move some of this paint around. And I'm doing a nice single smooth brush stroke all the way across to blend this paint in. And it's not perfectly straight yet. That's okay. I will get there. I could use a nice flat tip of a brush to make that happen. So take a few minutes, play with your water. Once our sky is dry, we'll go back up to the top of our sky and finish our sky area. And then with the option to add any green mountains in the distance. So if you want to just do sky and water, that's fine. It's absolutely up to you. As an artist, the choices are yours on what you want to do and where. And I always love talking about that, because sometimes in art classes, folks feel like you have to copy what the teacher's doing. And I'm really here to inspire you and guide you through the creative process. I would always encourage you to do your own thing. So if you want to use different colors, if you want to incorporate different things, go for it. This is an opportunity for you to really just practice your creativity and to see what you come up with, because there's very little risk in what we're doing, and you're going to do a great job no matter what. So I'm just doing some nice smooth brush strokes. And I'm going to come in, I have a nice brush here with a nice flat tip, and with a steady hand I'm going to try to do a nice even line here. Nice and smooth. Even-ish, right? You can lay your canvas flat on your table, or you can have it up on an easel. You can work however you're most comfortable. I paint both ways. I paint with it flat sometimes. I also paint with it on an easel. So it's up to you. Sometimes I like, if it's a small canvas, I like sometimes hold it when I'm teaching. Absolutely up to you, whatever you're most comfortable with. So that waterline is a little bit more clear now. So feel free to keep working if you need to. Feel free to pause the video if you need to spend a little bit more time. If you're ready to proceed, you're welcome to play the video again and join back with me. Right now my yellow on the sky is dried, so I'm going to jump in and do light blue sky for the remaining area. So nice light blue. This is where you are going to use a little bit of your white. And I'm just going to dip my brush in a little bit of the water. If your water has like a yellow tinge to it, don't worry, it's not going to matter too much. And I'm just going to slowly move this around. I'm doing left, right brush strokes. Play with how the water moves around the paint pigment. I'm bringing the light blue up and into the top just a little bit. And you can see it's giving me a really soft blue sky. Feel free to play with that. You can, long, smooth brush strokes will eliminate halfway brush strokes basically. So you can see I'm just doing like a nice soft transition. I am going to put mountains on top of this, like above the lake area. If you don't want mountains, that's fine. But we're going to be layering birch trees on top of this. So we'll probably spend a total of 15-20 minutes just layering in the background. If you want to spend more than that, you can. You can see I have a nice soft blue sky. Again, we're going to be covering a lot of this up, due to this is just a background detail. I'm also going to be putting in some mountains. So this is just base coverage. And I'm bringing down the sky all the way because I'm not sure how tall I want my mountains to be yet. So it's good to have sky painted behind your mountains if you're doing layering techniques to ensure that the sky is there no matter what. And you can layer your mountains big or small on top. I'm just dipping my brush in a little bit of water. And you can play with bringing in a little bit of blue onto the yellow to help create a transition. So a little water, a little bit of light blue. You could do some long, smooth brush strokes to bring in some like faux clouds if you wanted to on top of the yellow. I'm using the long and the skinny part of the brush. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I'm just giving you some tips and tricks along the way. All right. So again, feel free to give yourself a little bit of time. If you want to add more white paint and do any clouds in your sky, this is the time to do it. So right now, some of this transition area looks a little cloudy, so I'm just adding, I'm going to grab a little bit of white and just add a little bit of white to the top of this area. Adding white to the tops of clouds adds a little bit of light here and there, so if you wanted to add any white, it just adds a little bit of brightness in the distance. And I'm doing like long skinny clouds with my brush. And you can play with how many clouds you might want to add or not. I'm just being really playful. Some clouds can have a little bit more height. You can have the little clouds kind of pattering in. I'm just layering them in different areas. Again, I'm not going to go too crazy here because the clouds in the background isn't the focal piece, the birch trees are. So I'm just going to let this dry. Again, feel free to pause the video, take 5-10 minutes more if you need to finish the clouds, finish the background. But I am going to add in, when you're ready, again, take a few minutes to do the clouds if you need to, but I'm going to show you how to do some mountains as well. I'm going to do some dark green mountains. So I have a green color here. And keep in mind the birch trees are white, right? White and gray and black. So I'm going to do some kind of darker contrasting green mountains. So I'm going to use a little bit of green paint and a touch of black. Tiny touch of black on my plate. You don't need a lot. And you can get a medium, small to medium sized brush, that's fine. I'm going to use the same one just because I can, but I'm just going to mix kind of a darker green color here. And I want this to be a little darker than a grass green just because there's going to be white trees going on top. So for this will give me a little bit of contrast. And you can figure out if you wanted to add mountains, how tall or short you might want them to be. I'm just going to kind of come in and just play with height. So these are just like different heights. And I'm just gonna, I'm playing with the ridgeline a little bit first. I can always change it. So I just kind of started somewhere. Doesn't hurt to start somewhere. And I'm just gonna fill it in as we go. And I can always change the ridgeline. You can see I went up quite a bit. And this is fairly dark. If you don't want to go this dark for your mountain, you don't have to. So I'm going to fill this in and then I'm going to adjust my ridgeline. I'm going to go right down to the bottom of the lake, right here. And I'm going to do a nice smooth brush stroke where my water, the bottom of my mountain, reaches the water line. And I'm going to do nice smooth horizontal brush strokes with my dark green to fill this in. But this is where you can just take a couple deep breaths and enjoy the process. Usually my classes last about an hour and a half to 2 hours, but this video is designed for you to pause the video to do more detail work along the way. So if you pause the video in between each step, just give yourself 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes to do different areas, and then just restart the video where you need to. Because everybody works at different speeds. And this video is designed to be really basic for beginners. Sometimes in my classes, I definitely give level 2 tips, which are folks that are used to their painting a little bit more comfortable. They like to do additional depth techniques and additional things. But I like to keep it easy too, just in case folks haven't painted that much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean off this brush and I'm going to use a smaller brush to define the ridgeline. Just gives me a little bit more control over some of those peaks and some of the mountain areas. So I'm just going to give some, going over this ridgeline. I can define how many peaks I want, and I can just be a little bit more free-handed, a little bit more precise. I love giving little rock-like bumps to make it look like a natural scape. But definitely, sometimes when folks are new to painting, you tend to do really rounded like hills. Try to add a little bit of a, I don't want to say a shaky hand, but give it a little bit of a natural brush stroke to make your mountain look a little bit more realistic. And you can see I have a lot of different ridges and things. You can try that. Try holding a little bit further back on your brush. Sometimes that helps. Like this. I can kind of lean back in my chair, close one eye if that helps. And you can have some straight places, that's fine too, but for me that mountain range looks really quite natural. I have some rounded areas, I have some natural lake ridges. And I'm pretty happy with the color. You can say I have some dark colors and some lighter colors. That just happened naturally through brush strokes. So again, take a few minutes and play with your mountains and your sky. And I want you to be happy with these areas because next we're going to be adding in our birch trees on top. So take a few minutes to finish your sky, your mountains, and your lake, and we'll get started with our next steps soon. Okay, so before you move on to your trees, I'm going to encourage you to make sure everything is dry. Sometimes if you have any wet paint, you can use your finger to like move it around. So I had a little bit of wet green paint here and I had a little bit of wet green paint on my mountains and I just kind of ran my finger over it just to smooth it out. You can use a brush or you can use your finger, it doesn't matter. But make sure that everything is totally dry to the touch. Oh, look, I have a little bit of wet paint over here before you start your trees. But I can start to prep you for some of the tree detail as we get going. So the trees are, and I am happy with my background. If you wanted to add a little bit more dark blue on top of this ridgeline, you can. But for me, I'm happy with that. But again, pause the video if you need to do a little bit more work. If you need to let it dry, feel free to restart this video when you're ready for your trees. But I am going to grab some white paint and I'm going to kick off the birch tree detail. So I have my plate here. I have some white paint. The white paint that I'm using today is pretty thick. So everyone uses different style white paint. This is a heavy bodied white paint. So, and you're not going to need that much. You don't need too much paint at all, but be mindful of how much paint you're using. And I want to have a nice clean brush. So my brush that I'm using has a bunch of green on it. So I'm just going to clean off my brush really well. Sometimes in classes, folks like to clean their water. It's not necessary, but if you want to, you can. But I have this here, and I'm just going to start by just getting a little bit of this white paint. And we're going to do some of the biggest trees first, okay? So based on the inspiration, there's 3 or 4 big trees. And I'm going to use the width of this 1/2-inch brush to do those trees. So we're going to go from top to the bottom. I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to be brave and just do a straight line up, roughly. And that's going to be one of my first trees. Now you can define if you wanted to make it a little bit wider by doing a second coat. You can do some more clean edging after. But these are some of your bigger trees, so you can decide how big you actually want them to be. So I'm doing some nice smooth brush strokes from the top to the bottom. And then maybe let it dry and you can come back to it. I like how it's imperfect. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do another one over here, straight all the way up. Do a continuous brush stroke, see what happens if you go all the way up. Straight-ish is okay. Just be brave. Yes, you're painting on top of everything you just did. Don't worry. And then I might just start to do a little bit more narrow of trees. So I may turn my brush to the side. And I'm going to start to add in just a little bit skinnier. So I'm not going to use the wide side of the brush. And really we're just getting down placement of trees. So I'm using the same brush, the side of this brush, for some medium-sized trees. You can refine the shape as you go, but start getting some basic lines in here for general placement. I'm going to do another one over here. Maybe this one's going to be a little closer. This one. And I am going to switch to a smaller brush for some more like sapling style trees in a minute. And I can use a smaller brush to refine some of these shapes as well. So just know that we're going to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that as we get going here. So I'm going to do 2 big ones, and I'm going to do one more over here. And then I'm going to switch to sapling style trees. And we will add just a few branches on these trees as well, but we're going to switch to a smaller size brush. So for me, from a big tree perspective, I'm happy with the size of those trees. If you wanted to come in with your bigger brush and fill in these trees, white in color, you're welcome to do that. We will be adding some gray and black detail to them. If you wanted to make these a little bit more gray versus white, that's fine. If you have an idea, feel free to incorporate it. I'm going to use the side of this brush to do a nice thin, skinny edging for the side of these trees. These trees should have a nice smooth edge of some sort. If you need to dip your brush in a little bit of water, again, if you're using a thick-bodied paint, a little water can give you a nice smooth glide and edge for these trees. So I love using water with acrylic paint. It really helps move things around, and it still dries really quite quickly. So a little bit of water on your brush. I kind of dab it off on my plate. I do a nice steady hand. You can do bottom up or top down or bottom up, either way, to do these nice clean edges for these birch trees. Now again, you can move as quickly or as slowly as you wish. It's absolutely up to you. Go at your own speed. But we're just doing some of the large and medium sized trees right now, and we'll do the saplings with a smaller brush in a few minutes. But I want you to be happy with the basic coverage of the trees and the basic shape of the trees. And again, a little water on my brush. I kind of wipe off the water and then I kind of manage the amount of paint on it, and it gives me a nice smooth edge. I'm also using my pinky to stabilize my hand, which is really quite helpful. And I'm just filling in these trees. It's okay if the trees have a little texture. The most important thing is that you can't see the background or the mountains through these trees. So these two look really good. They have some texture. I can't see the mountains anymore. This is a fairly heavy bodied white paint that I'm using. Not everybody uses the same paint. So just give yourself a little bit of grace. You could spend 2 hours on this painting, or you could spend 5 hours on this painting. It's absolutely up to you on the level of detail. And if you want to go really slow and spend more time on it, that's absolutely fine. That's why, again, I've designed these videos for you to kind of pause and stop and go as you need to. But I encourage you to keep this playing as you're working. And if you wanted to use the comments below to ask any questions, I'm happy to help you there. If you need any links or suggestions for products, I'm happy to be a resource for you. So don't hesitate to reach out if you need any assistance throughout this project or on future projects. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So again, we're working on the coverage of the trees. And I'm just doing nice, good coverage and nice smooth edges with the side of a brush. So you want a nice new style brush if you can. Clean bristles. It'll give you nice edging properties to have a nice solid structure for your tree. And again, your birch trees can be bigger or smaller than mine. It's absolutely fine. I will come in and add some saplings in just a few minutes, but I'm just getting these nice and solidified before we move on. Nice smooth brush strokes. And again, use a little bit of water for coverage if you need to. And I'm just focusing on the edging and the coverage for these large to medium-sized trees. I'm doing nice smooth brush strokes. And I love this painting because the background is so inspiring and it's so beautiful. It's very calming. Imagine we're sitting on a lake overlooking birch trees and we see this beautiful scenery in the background. It's quite stunning. So I hope you're enjoying this project. If you haven't yet liked this video or enjoy this tutorial, I encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and like this video. It helps promote the visibility to others that also may be able to enjoy it. But it's so glad you're here with us today, painting with us. So again, I'm doing nice solid colors for these trees. And I have some mountains showing over here. So I'll give this a minute to dry. Sometimes one layer of white needs to dry before you do another. So just give yourself a little bit of patience. So for me, I'm going to let these dry. I'm going to shift to a smaller brush to do some of the sapling-like detail. So I'm going to clean off that brush. And you can set it to dry. Once it's clean, you can set it to dry on a paper towel. That's some of the best brush care that you can do, is setting it on a clean paper towel nearby. And then finding a smaller brush for some sapling-like detail. For me, it's sapling-like detail is just longer, skinnier trees. And I have a little bit of white paint here on a small brush. I am gonna bring a little bit of water on my plate with some of my thick bodied paint, bringing in a couple dollops of water and moving that paint around just to break it up just a little bit. It helps with the flow, especially with birch trees as you're doing single long shapes. There we go. And this brush may be too small, but I'm just going to go for it anyways. And I'm just going to start at the top and just do a straight-ish line down for some skinny little saplings over here. And I'm going to do two next to each other. And I'm using my pinky to stabilize my hand, so I'm kind of dragging it next to me. If you're dragging your pinky, just make sure you're not dragging it through a birch tree nearby. That's not a good thing. But get a little bit more paint. And you can go bottom up or top down. This is just a long, skinny sapling. Check and make sure you're using the right brush. This brush has a few stragglers, so just find a brush that you have nice, clean edging for. And you can use any size brushes you want. In my classes, I'm never going to tell you to use a size 3 flat tip when you may want to use a different style brush. So just play with the brushes. One of the things about being an artist and practicing your creativity is just playing with the tools that you have. And artists use brushes as a tool, right, to paint something. Artists also use a lot of other different tools as well, like paper towels and your fingers and all these different things to paint a given subject. So just keep that in mind as you're going along here. So there's another sapling here. I'm going to do another one next to it. This brush I'm using isn't so great. So I'm conscious of that as an artist, so I'm just going to switch brushes. So if a brush isn't working for you, just switch brushes to another. So I'm going to put that one down. And I'm looking for a nice flat tip brush that I can do a little bit better of a brush stroke. So let's try this one. This is kind of a rounded tip brush here. I'm going to try to do a really skinny tree next to this. And then I'll show you how to do some branches on these trees. Yes, we will do branches on our birch trees. But it's good to get all these basic tree forms in first. And yes, we'll do a lot of the birch-like detail on these trees as well. There we go. So I have a skinny tree over there. I'm going to add one more of those skinny trees over here just for the composition to be balanced. So I might add another one over here on this edge, just a long skinny one, and then I'm going to call that done for the tree, the core trees itself. And I tried to be natural about how I stagger these trees based on spacing in between the trees, as well as the size of the trees. That comes with practice, so don't worry, we're going to be adding in some branches, which will help with any weird spacing if you're experiencing that. So I'm just doing some long, smooth brush strokes to get in these basic trees. And again, the whole goal of this step is to make sure you have enough white coverage on these trees. So I'm just going to come in again. And if you're running low on white, we're going to be mixing a little bit of gray to do some of the birch-like detail with black. So if you want to save some of that, that's fine. Everybody has different types of supplies. I'm using my pinky to stabilize my hand. So the coverage on these trees isn't too bad right now. I will show you how to add some secondary branches. So I am going to bring a little bit more water. Again, water will help stretch your white paint. And this is a great tip for doing some of the branches. And I'm using a small round tip brush. This is a size 3, but you can use any size that you have. 2, 3, 4, or 5 is perfect. I'm doing some sidelining branches on the tops half of these trees. So if I draw a line, imaginary line through the middle of this, I'm going to do some branches on the top going up. And I'm just going to add a couple of really natural branches. Just starting on one tree. And I'm just going to alternate from the left to the right. And they can be overlapping. They can be short or long. So the design and the inspiration in this picture doesn't have any leaves on it. So I'm just going to do some alternating from the left to the right, doing some of these long branches. They could be light in color, they could be dark in color. Just use your eye. And I'm just doing the skinny little tree first. So I just did, so if I did this little skinny tree here, I did 1 branch, 2 branch, 3 branches by alternating from the right, left, and right. And then I added some of these little branches off of it. And you can see I kind of went at like an angle to make it look natural. It's also kind of highlighting like the spread of the scene, which is really quite pretty. So the angles of your branches matter and can support your composition if you're paying attention to it. I'm just going to this next tree here. And I'm layering my branches so they're kind of near each other, but they're kind of holding their own space as well. And you can see I have nice coverage. I can see a lot of the beautiful sunset still coming through, which is what I wanted, which is great. Kind of happened unintentionally. And your branches can be light, and you can do as many or as few as you want. So for me, I really like the look of that up there. So I'm going to add a lot more branches up there. So kind of pause and reflect and stop as you need to for you to get the look that you want. So that means some of these other branches only go halfway because you don't want to disrupt something really pretty that's happening. That's okay. So for me, some of these branches over here, I may not go all the way over because I like what's happening here. So it's really just about using your eye as an artist and doing as much or as little branch-like work as you like. For me, I like that I have the sun kind of coming through, but I still see the branches. That's good spacing for me. So I'm just going to pause with those branches over there, and I'm just going to shift over here. And I'm just going to do the same thing, just bring some branches in, maybe do some little branches coming off. Sometimes when you paint, you have to look at the whole composition holistically versus just focusing on one tree and like what one tree should be. And that comes with practice, but I like talking through it for you to consider some of these ideals as you're painting. So as you think about it, each tree doesn't need to have 3 or 4 branches. Each tree can have as many branches on it as you wish based on your composition and what you're trying to accomplish. And if you're trying to accomplish something that's visually pleasing, so it's really just about filling in the branches where it makes the most sense overall. So again, you don't need to have too many, just do as many as you feel like that works best for you and your creative eye. Using a small brush will really help. I think I'm getting pretty close to what I'm going for here. Great, so go ahead and take as much or as little time as you need to finish up the branches. I mean, again, you could spend an hour refining these branches, but for me, I'm just going to make sure that all my tree trunks have nice solid color on them. And then I'll show you how to add the birch bark on the trees. And you could even do the birch bark as you are filling these in. But again, feel free to pause the video if you need to take a little bit more time, or you can listen in until we transition to the next step. That always works too. So I'm just do some nice smooth brush strokes to fill this in. And we'll be doing some more coverage with the black coming in a minute. So one thing I'm going to do to prepare for the next step is to make a little bit of gray. So I'm going to take a little bit of black and a little bit of white, and I'm going to make a little bit of a gray color. And you're going to find a small brush of choice, and you're going to add some kind of scratchy like brush strokes to your, and you can do alternating left to right. You're just doing long, skinny, light like lines for your birch marks. So you can kind of outline maybe one side of the tree. You can play with how you apply your birch bark. You can do little lines vertically. I like to do some longer lines and some skinnier lines. There's a lot of gray and black on birch trees, so it's really just about playing with the detail. You can always come in with more white if you need to. Sometimes a dry brush works really well, which is just like not a lot of paint or water. But I just like to do a little bit of horizontal dotting and dashing, and that's where the birch bark will really start to come to life. I like to do the light gray first, and then I do some of the darker black detail, but it's absolutely up to you. You can do some longer horizontal brush strokes, you can do some short ones. You could really play with how you blend these colors in, so you could grab some white and kind of just play with a little bit of white on the tops of some of this gray. So blending colors here and playing with the texture of the birch bark is what's really going to make it come to life. So I'm just putting a little bit of like white smudged on top of some of the gray, and you can see how it's bringing it to life just a bit. If I put just a little bit of black, you can just scratch like with just the few tip bristles of this brush, you can scratch a little bit of black on the birch bark. Again, alternate from the left side of the tree to the right to give it a little bit more balanced. So I'm doing some vertical strokes and I'm just doing some horizontal, just slight little touch details. So that's just a little bit of a detail on how to do birch there, but just play with the birch detail. Again, I'm gonna pick another tree, another branch, adding in some gray-like detail. The smaller the brush, the better here. Unless you have a nice tip where you can play with some scratches. And again, I'm doing the kind of easy beginner version here. If you have a really fine point brush, you can come in with some really small, fine like pencil lines. But not everybody has really fine brushes, so you're welcome to use what brushes you have to play with, this birch-like character, this bark-like character. And again, bringing in different grays, dark grays and light grays. Play with building layers of the bark with different grays. Again, you can bring in white if you need to kind of re-soften it anywhere. It's absolutely up to you. And we will do some highlighting and some accent detail after for some of our trees. This tree got a little dark, so guess what? I can come in with a little bit of white and put some more white back on the tree. That's not a big deal. So it's okay to be playful and know that you can always go back in and you can correct any work that you don't like. So if you did something too dark or if you don't like the way you've texturized something, you can always use white paint to cover it up. I'm using a little bit too big of a brush, so I'm going to find a smaller brush to use. So this one's a little smaller. This is, I think this is a 2/0 fraction brush. So I'm just going to spin this around. This might give me a little bit more control. And I'm just going to go to the next tree and play with the birch bark. So again, I'm going to do horizontal scratching, a little dot on the right, and I'm just going to go over to the left. And maybe I'll do a little bit of a vertical line. And then I'll come in with a little bit of the black to give a little bit of black detail here and there. So birch trees have different patches of bark color. Different patches, so it's just really about doing one. I'm going to come in and I love adding, I play with the bristles of the brush. The top bristles can really give you some extra texturing. A little bit of the black contrast, even though it might seem scary, it does make your birch trees look more natural because there are definitely some dark spots on birch trees. So I'm just doing really tiny dots and dashes, texturing, alternating on the birch trees from the left to the right. And we will do some white outlining if you have white remaining on these birch trees after to really bring them to life. There's a lot of shading properties and a lot of shading qualities we can do. Again, try to keep these classes a little easy, but it's fun to talk through some of the shading qualities. So I'm just putting a little bit of gray on this one here. And then as you're doing your birch detail, I'll show you what you can do to your branches as well. Because right now our branches are all just a little bit white. And one shading property that we can do with our branches is on the underside of the branches, you could do a dark gray underline. So I have a little bit of a gray right here. And if I spin my brush, I have a good amount of paint on it. On the underside of any branch, you can just do a light gray underline to add a little bit of shading as an option. So pick a branch, do a little bit of a gray underline, and that will just add a little shading. I am going to mix a little bit of water. This is a great area to use a little water. It will thin out the paint color, which is perfect. And just do a light gray underline, maybe on the underside of most of my branches. Let's see what that looks like. And you can see some of the difference already. Looks great. I'm just doing a smooth, there's water on my brush. It's a smooth, silky, soft gray underline. Really easy way to add shading to the underside of these branches. And you can also use a little water on your brush as you're doing your birch-like detail as well. So again, I'm doing a little bit of this watered down gray on the underside of every branch. And it looks awesome. Easy way to add depth to your painting. So again, go at your own speed. We're all working on different things. I'm here just to give you different tips and tricks along the way. I have lots of videos on my channel, so if you're interested in doing more with us, I would love to see you again. So great to be here with you. Hope you're enjoying this class. And you can see what a little bit of gray does on the underside of those branches. Pretty neat, right? While you have your gray, you can pick one side of the tree, maybe it's the right side, and do a gray line for consideration. Trees usually, these trees actually, a lot of birch trees have like white outlines as well to really highlight the brightness. So you can play with adding a little bit of gray or a little bit of white to highlight the birch tree. I've seen a lot of birch trees with like white outlines kind of on the inside of the tree going down vertically to highlight like the brightness, but you can play with that dark gray line on the side as well. So I'll do it here and there. You can decide what you decide to do. But I'm just going to continue to work my way over on my birch trees. I've done these ones over here. I can continue to tweak and modify them if I need to. Don't hesitate to add a little bit of water to stretch your paint and continue adding in that birch-like detail. I'm doing horizontal little dots and dashes, alternating again from the left side of the tree to the right. So many ways you can do some vertical lines down to bring your eye down the tree. And then I'll come in with like a darker contrasting color. Just a little touch goes a long way. Maybe I'll just jump right in and just do this one here. And try to be really natural and fairly abstract. That's what will make your tree look most natural. You can do a gray outline down like I'm playing with over here. You can kind of pick and choose how you want to stylize the texture and how dark you might want this gray to be or how light you want this gray to be. It's absolutely up to you. It's kind of fun to play with dark and light grays. And the smaller the brush tip you have, this is fairly thick. Again, some of us have smaller brushes, but the softer your hand is, the softer the brush stroke you can get because you're just really lightening. You're not pushing down on the brush. Sometimes when you push down on the brush, you get a more wide brush stroke. If you soften your hand, you get a lighter brush stroke. And I'm going to come in here with a little bit darker of a color. So again, I'm just doing different accent colors with dark grays and light grays for some of this tree-like detail. And I'll come in with just a tiny touch of this black or a really dark gray. You can decide. I love the contrast with the black. It really makes it a bit punchy. And you can decide what lines you want to be horizontal and what lines you may want to be vertical. Because birch trees have a little bit of everything. I once taught a birch class, and I had a woman, it looked at a picture of a birch tree the whole time when she was doing her birch detail. And when she finished, it looked so realistic. I was so impressed. And she goes, "Oh yeah, I was just looking at a picture of a real birch the whole time." And she used a lot of dark grays, which was really neat to see. And she used a lot of blacks, but her birch looked great when she was done. So it's okay to like reference a photo if you wanted to look it up, that's fine. So there's some more completed birch trees. If I have any darker areas, I can always, again, paint over them. And your painting's gonna evolve. So again, just go at your own pace. If you need to use a smaller brush, if you need to add a little bit more water to your paint to soften it, just check and make sure you have what you need. And again, if you have any questions, you're welcome to use the comments below. If you're enjoying this class, I would love to hear your feedback on what tips worked well for you. If there's additional paintings you would love to see in the future from me, please include that feedback down in the comments. Would love to see you again. But take your time with this birch-like detail. Again, you could spend another 30 minutes here, you could spend another hour. It's absolutely up to you. We all have different time during the day, right? So I'm just coming along, and it's okay to work on something a little bit and then come back to it. If you're taking something home, or if you only have a little bit of a window today, you can always pick this up after. I'm using really basic acrylic craft paints. I'll put some links down below so you can just see what craft paints I'm using today for this painting. You don't need to use fancy paints if you're painting, as a hobbyist. It's not a big deal. It's really fun just to start painting and not worry too much about the supplies. Just, you can pick up stuff pretty much anywhere. So again, I added a little bit of that dark like branch detail on the underside of some of these trees. You can come in and check and see if you want to add any more contrast anywhere else. But we're really all just focusing on what's important to us at this point in the class. If you wanted to add any grounding lines to the edges of your trees, you could do a light line or a gray line. Maybe just certain parts of your trees have like a grounding line. That's okay too. Again, you can always soften any grounding vertical lines with a little bit of white paint or gray paint. It's absolutely up to you. If you wanted to add a bird to your tree, there's so many things that you can do. If you wanted to add leaves, you could. In today's class, I'm not adding leaves. If you wanted to add any white to do any additional highlighting to the birch, sometimes adding in just a little bit of extra white on top will just make things just re-pop, because the white is where our eyes stands out, right? It catches our attention. So if you wanted to do any white detailing just on top of any of the gray, it will give you more texture for your trees. And birch trees are all about texture. So I'm just coming in, having a little fun, and just putting a little bit of white in some areas on top. And maybe it'll cover up any like dark smudges that you may not have liked. My white has a little bit of gray in it, which is okay. But the more you could spend, an hour playing with this birch detail, and especially with the texturing here is really important. It's really fun too. So you know what your schedule is, you know what your time is today. Play with this birch detail as much or as little as you like. But I hope that you enjoyed today's class. Keep working if you want to keep working. But again, my name was Megan, and I'm so glad you're here. Please reach out if you need anything. And again, so great to see you, and thanks again for being here. Take care.